The sound I had journeyed so far to find, the sound that signaled peace, was the chaotic, joyful, and utterly unadulterated noise of my teenage son's happiness. It was a symphony of frantic keyboard clicks, triumphant shouts, and groaned frustrations, all bubbling up from the basement of our new home. After years of a demanding career that had made me more of a distant benefactor than a present father. After a divorce that had left our small family bruised and disconnected. This noisy, vibrant evidence of my son's engagement with his life was the sweetest music I had ever heard. My name is Mark, and for 20 years, I had been a ghost in the global machine of the video game industry. As the co-founder and lead engine architect of Phoenix Games, I had lived a life of punishing crunch cycles and relentless pressure, building the digital worlds that millions inhabited. I had achieved a level of success that was unimaginable, but the cost had been my own world, my own family. I had sold my stake in the company, walking away with a fortune that felt like compensation for time I could never get back. I used it to buy this large, comfortable house in the impossibly green and aggressively tranquil suburb of Maple Creek. My new and only mission was to be a full-time father to my son, Leo. Leo's world, a world I was only just beginning to truly understand, was one of pixels and precision, of complex strategies and split-second teamwork. He was the captain of an elite, amateur esports team called Tempest. They were 5 fiercely dedicated and remarkably talented high school kids, chasing a dream of professional gaming in a world that was as competitive as any traditional sport. My first and most important project in our new home was to give them a professional-grade space to chase that dream. I had spared no expense, transforming the cavernous, unfinished basement into a state-of-the-art training facility, 5 liquid-cooled gaming PCs, professional-grade peripherals, ergonomic chairs, and a dedicated, commercial-grade fiber optic line. Most importantly, I had lined the walls and ceiling with the best acoustic soundproofing money could buy. It was my tangible act of support, my way of saying, I see you, and I believe in you. We had been in Maple Creek for less than a month. The team was in the middle of a tense practice match against a top-ranked European squad, their voices a low, intense murmur of coordinated call-outs, barely audible from the kitchen above. I was smiling to myself, proud of the quiet sanctuary I had built, when a sharp, imperious knock echoed from the front door. I opened it to a woman who seemed to be the physical embodiment of the neighborhood's restrictive covenants. Her beige pantsuit was wrinkle-free. Her blonde hair was a masterpiece of structural engineering, and she held a clipboard to her chest like a shield. I am Brenda Mills, she announced, her voice as crisp as a freshly ironed shirt. I am the president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. Her eyes, a pale and disapproving shade of blue, flickered past me. I am here to discuss the ongoing auditory disturbance originating from your property. Auditory disturbance, I asked, genuinely confused. I couldn't hear a thing. Do not play dumb with me. Mr. Chen, she snapped, her lips thinning, the shouting, the constant, aggressive screaming. It has been a persistent problem since you moved in. This is a quiet, family-oriented community. We value peace and productivity. It's my son and his friends, I explained, my voice calm and reasonable. They're a team. They're practicing. Practicing what she scoffed, her voice a symphony of condescension. A screaming contest I raised 2 varsity athletes, Mr. Chen. My sons played lacrosse. They were outside, in the fresh air, learning the values of discipline, sportsmanship, and real teamwork. They were not locked away in a dark basement, staring at a screen and giving themselves brain rot. The casual cruelty of her dismissal, The arrogant wave of her hand that invalidated my son's entire world sent a hot, protective flash of anger through me. "It's a different kind of sport," I said, my voice losing some of its warmth, "but it requires just as much discipline and teamwork. I can assure you." She was not interested in my assurances. "This is your one and only warning," she said, her voice now cold and official. "Control your son. End this disruptive hobby. We have very strict bylaws in Maple Creek. I will not hesitate to enforce them. We expect our residents to contribute to the peaceful and productive character of this community. Thus far, your family has failed to do so." She turned and marched away, a self-appointed guardian of traditional values who had just identified a new and insidious form of modern decay. I closed the door, a cold knot of anger in my stomach. I had come to this place to escape conflict, to build a peaceful world for my son. I had not realized that I had moved into a battleground, and that the first shots would be fired by a woman who believed that the sound of my son's passion was a declaration of war. Brenda Mills was a woman for whom a warning was not a suggestion, but the opening salvo in a campaign of total war. Her failure to intimidate me into immediate submission seemed only to galvanize her. The full bureaucratic might of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association was brought to bear upon my family, and the violation notices, printed on that same oatmeal-colored paper, began to arrive with a relentless, predictable rhythm. The first fine was for $150, a formal citation for excessive and repetitive auditory nuisance. It was, of course, for the shouting that was now almost entirely contained within my acoustically sealed basement. The complaint, the notice explained, was based on a witness report of noise audible from the public sidewalk. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the only way to have heard anything was to have been pressing an ear directly against the basement's small, thick-paned window. My first instinct, born from decades of managing complex, multi-layered projects, was to solve the problem with more and better technology. I had already soundproofed the room, but if she was going to be this obsessive, I would be even more so. I called back the acoustics company and had them install a second, solid core door at the bottom of the basement stairs, creating a sound lock effect. I also had them inspect the window, where they found a tiny, almost imperceptible gap in the sealant, which they promptly filled. The basement was now as soundproof as a professional recording studio. I sent a polite, factual email to the board, detailing the additional measures I had taken. My logical engineering-based solution was met with a new, illogical assault. A week later, another fine arrived, this time for $200 for an unauthorized structural modification the new door I had installed. It had not, of course, been pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee, which Brenda chaired. It was then that I began to understand the true, pathetic source of her venom. I saw her one afternoon at the community park, watching a group of kids half-heartedly kicking a soccer ball. Her expression was not one of fond nostalgia, but of a kind of bitter, resentful longing. I later learned from a chatty neighbor that Brenda had been a star collegiate tennis player, a nationally ranked athlete with professional aspirations, until a knee injury had ended her career in her senior year. She had tried coaching, but her rigid, old-school methods had failed to connect with a new generation of kids. Esports, this new, alien world of competition that she couldn't understand or control, was not just an annoyance to her. It was a personal affront. It was a thriving, legitimate sport that made her own past, and her own expertise, feel obsolete. My son's success was a mirror to her own lost potential. The fines continued to escalate in their absurdity. I was fined for excessive guest parking, when the 5 teammates' cars were parked legally on the public street. I was fined for an improper commercial-grade installation for my fiber optic line. My calls with Julian, my old partner at Phoenix Games, were my only escape. He understood the world Leo was trying to conquer. "You have to see them play, Julian," I said, my voice filled with a father's pride. "Leo's game sense is on another level. He's making calls like a pro. I've seen the VODs from their last qualifier. Mark," he said, his voice serious. "The pro scouts are already talking about Tempest. They're a dark horse, but they're terrifyingly good. You know, the offer to sign them to the Phoenix Games Professional League is still on the table. We'd build a whole division around them." "Let's get them through the regionals first," I said, laughing. "It's Leo's dream, not mine. I'm just the landlord." "Some landlord," Julian said. "You're the best coach they could ever ask for." The conversation was a warm, welcome reminder of the legitimacy of my son's passion. But the reality in Maple Creek was different. The war with Brenda was a constant, grinding presence. It escalated from the bureaucratic to the physical. One afternoon, a new, custom-built server rack I had ordered for the team, designed to host their private practice games, was being delivered. The delivery truck, according to the driver, had been forced to park down the street because a large, beige SUV, Brenda's car, was parked directly in front of my driveway for over an hour, completely blocking access. The driver, struggling with the heavy, awkward crate, had dropped it on the curb, damaging the sensitive electronics inside. The act was deniable. She was just visiting a neighbor, but the malice was clear. It was a deliberate, calculated act of obstruction and sabotage. I spent the rest of the day and most of the night in the basement, my hands flying across circuit boards and wiring harnesses, my old skills as a hardware architect kicking in. I repaired the damage, but a new, harder line had been crossed. I was no longer just a resident trying to be a good neighbor. I was a father protecting his son's dream from a woman whose own dreams had died, and who was now determined to drag everyone else down into her own bitter, silent world. The damage to the server rack was a clear and deliberate escalation, a move from bureaucratic harassment to physical sabotage. My first act was to install a new, more comprehensive security system, a network of discrete, high-definition cameras that covered every angle of my property. It was a distasteful necessity, a sign that my home was no longer a sanctuary, but a defensible position. I felt a deep, weary sadness as I ran the cables. This was not the retirement I had envisioned. With direct, physical attacks now too risky, Brenda retreated to her preferred battlefield, the court of public opinion. The Maple Creek Neighbors private Facebook page became the primary instrument of her psychological warfare. She began a systematic and vicious campaign of slander, designed to socially isolate my son and his friends and to paint me as a negligent, irresponsible parent. Her posts were always cloaked in the disingenuous language of concern. "Dear parents of Maple Creek," one post began, accompanied by a stock photo of a smiling family riding bicycles. "I feel it is my duty as a mother and as your HOA president to raise an issue of growing concern. There is a group of teenage boys in our community who are spending upwards of 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, locked away in a basement. They get no fresh air, no exercise, and have minimal real-world social interaction. This is not a healthy or productive lifestyle. We must ask ourselves what kind of values we are teaching our children when we allow such obsessive and isolating behavior to go unchecked." The post was a work of artful slander. It twisted dedication into obsession, training into isolation, and my support into neglect. The comments from her loyal followers were swift and brutal. "You are so right, Brenda. It's a tragedy. Their parents should be ashamed. My son is on the football team, and he learns about character and discipline. What do you learn from staring at a screen? Thank you for being brave enough to protect our community's children." A few days later, she escalated her attack, moving from insinuation to outright lies. A word of warning to residents. She wrote, "I was forced to call the non-emergency police line yesterday due to the sounds of a violent, aggressive argument coming from the Chen residents. When the group of boys who are always there finally emerged, their behavior was frankly quite menacing. As a woman, I no longer feel safe walking past that house alone. This is not the kind of element we want in Maple Creek." The violent, aggressive argument had been the team's triumphant celebration after winning a difficult qualifying match. The menacing behavior had been a group of excited, happy teenagers playfully shoving each other and celebrating a hard-won victory. She had twisted a moment of pure joy into a scene of incipient violence. The poison of her words seeped into the community and, inevitably, into my son's life. Leo came home from school one day. His shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with a deep, profound hurt that shattered my heart. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet and heavy. "They're calling us the basement trolls at school. Kids are saying we're dangerous, that we're a gang. Sarah's mom won't let her talk to me anymore. She said her parents read on the neighborhood Facebook page that I was a bad influence." He sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of the social ostracism crushing him. "What's the point of winning if everyone thinks we're monsters?" he whispered. In that moment, any lingering desire I had to find a peaceful resolution, to be the bigger man, was burned away by a cold, protective rage. This was no longer about me, or about noise, or about bylaws. This was about my son's happiness, his friendships, his very sense of self-worth. And she was systematically destroying it with lies. I sat with Leo, my arm around his shoulders, and I felt the tectonic plates of my own life shift. I had retired to be a father, to be present. And now, being a father required me to do more than just offer comfort. It required me to fight. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat in my office, a space I had barely used. I opened my laptop and began to make a few quiet, discreet inquiries. I called Julian. "Julian," I said, my voice low and intense, "I need to know the exact, confirmed date for the VCT North American Finals. Not the one on the public website. I need the internal, broadcast schedule date." "I can get that," he said, his voice instantly serious. "Why?" "Because," I said, a plan beginning to form in my mind. A plan that was cold, calculated, and utterly ruthless. I am about to orchestrate the most public, most undeniable, and most satisfying product launch of my entire career. And the product is my son's victory. I had tried to play her game of polite, reasonable debate. I had tried to absorb her attacks. But she had now brought the war directly to my child. She had made a profound, tactical error. She had given me a reason to stop fighting like a retired civilian, and to start fighting like the man who had built a global empire. A man who understood, better than anyone, how to control the narrative and how to win. Having successfully, in her mind, poisoned the well of public opinion against us, Brenda moved to her most dangerous and cruel escalation. Convinced that she had the full, righteous backing of the community, she decided to weaponize the power of the state in the most intimate and terrifying way imaginable. She made a malicious, anonymous, and entirely fraudulent report to the Division of Family and Children's Services. an act designed not just to disrupt my son's team, but to challenge my very fitness as a father. The arrival of the social worker, a pleasant-looking woman named Ms. Albright, was a moment of surreal, heart-stopping terror. I was in the kitchen, preparing a tray of snacks for the team, when she rang the doorbell. She introduced herself, her face a mask of professional empathy, and explained the reason for her unannounced visit. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice gentle but firm as she sat at our kitchen table. "We received a detailed report from a concerned party. The report alleges a situation of potential neglect. It claims that your son, Leo, is being forced to spend an unhealthy and excessive amount of time in a dark, isolated basement, that he is being pressured to engage in an obsessive and unhealthy hobby, and that his educational and social development are being negatively impacted." I listened to the litany of lies, my blood running cold. Each word was a twisted, funhouse mirror perversion of the truth, a deliberate mischaracterization of my support as coercion, of his passion as an obsession. I felt a surge of protective fury so intense it made my hands tremble. But I knew, from my years of high-stakes negotiations, that anger was a luxury I could not afford. I took a deep breath and met her gaze. My own expression, a carefully constructed mask of calm, cooperative concern. "I understand your position, Ms. Albright, and I appreciate you doing your job," I said, my voice steady. "The allegations are, however, completely false. May I suggest you speak with Leo himself, and perhaps you'd like to see this dark, isolated basement for yourself." I called Leo upstairs. I explained the situation to him in a quiet, calm voice, and though I could see the fear and confusion in his eyes, he nodded, his own quiet strength coming to the fore. I left them in the living room, a decision that felt like tearing off a piece of my own soul, and waited in the kitchen, straining to hear the low murmur of their conversation. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Finally, Ms. Albright asked to see the basement. I led her down the stairs, my heart pounding. She was expecting a scene of squalor and neglect. She was expecting a stereotype. What she found instead was a world-class, professional training facility. The room was brightly lit by clean, recessed LED lighting. The 5 gaming stations were immaculate, the wiring managed with the precision of a NASA control room. The ergonomic, professional-grade chairs were arranged in a neat arc. A large whiteboard on one wall was covered in what looked like a complex football coach's playbook, a series of strategic diagrams and notes. A mini fridge in the corner was stocked with water, juice, and healthy snacks. The air was clean, filtered by the new ventilation system. Ms. Albright stood in the center of the room, her mouth slightly agape, her professional composure momentarily forgotten. She spun in a slow circle, taking it all in. This is not what I was expecting," she said, her voice filled with a genuine wonder. "Leo has been explaining his sport to me," she continued, turning to me, a new, profound respect in her eyes. "He calls it esports. He explained his team's practice schedule, their communication strategies, their current national ranking in the amateur league. He showed me a video of one of their matches. I had no idea. The level of skill, of teamwork, of sheer, lightning-fast intelligence. It's as complex as a chess match played at the speed of a fighter jet." She looked around the room again, at the tangible evidence of my support and investment. "Mr. Chen, the report I received was a vile and malicious lie. It painted you as a neglectful father. But what I see here is one of the most dedicated, supportive, and well-informed parents I have ever encountered. You haven't just tolerated your son's interest. You have celebrated it. You have empowered it. This is not neglect. Mr. Chen, this is a model of engaged and enlightened parenting. The relief that washed over me was so profound, so overwhelming, that I felt my knees weaken. I had been vindicated in the most absolute way possible. Filing a false report with our agency is a serious crime. Mr. Chen, she said, her voice now hard with a cold, professional anger. I will be filing a full report of this incident, and I will be recommending that the district attorney's office investigate the source of this malicious complaint. I am so sorry that your family was subjected to this. After she left, Leo and I sat in the quiet kitchen, the adrenaline slowly draining away. The immediate threat was gone, but the violation lingered. She had tried to use the power of the state to tear my family apart. She had attacked my very identity as a father. That night, my last vestiges of hesitation, my last shred of a desire to find a peaceful resolution, were gone. This was no longer a feud. This was a war for my family's honor, and I was going to end it. I made the call to Julian. Julian, I said, my voice cold and hard as steel. The plan we discussed. It's on. I need you to make the arrangements. The VCT finals are on Saturday, September 27th. The HOA picnic is on the 28th. The timing will be perfect. I need the host, the camera crew, and the biggest, shiniest trophy they've got. It's time to show these people what a productive hobby really looks like. I was done playing defense. I was done being the reasonable man. Brenda Mills had tried to burn my world to the ground. Now, I was going to show her what it felt like to be caught in the fire. Brenda's final desperate gambit was to forge a legal spear to hurl at the heart of my son's dream. Having failed to break us with the awesome and terrifying power of Child Protective Services, she fell back on the weapon she knew best, the HOA's bylaws, now supercharged with the threat of a personal, financially ruinous lawsuit. The formal cease and desist letter, delivered by a grim-faced courier, was the culmination of her entire campaign, a legal document that was less a warning and more a declaration of unconditional surrender or be destroyed. I sat with Leo at our kitchen table, the afternoon sun streaming in, a cruel counterpoint to the chilling, legalistic language of the document spread before us. It was a masterpiece of malicious litigation, a carefully constructed web of half-truths and outright fabrications. It formally accused me of operating an unlicensed, unregulated, and uninsured commercial enterprise from my home. The proof of this commercial intent was a printout of the Valorant Champions Tour's official website, with the multi-million-dollar prize pool circled in red ink. The letter rehashed all her old, disproven accusations, now presented as established facts. It described the team as a public nuisance, a source of aggressive and antisocial behavior, and a detriment to the community's family-friendly character. The language was designed to be as inflammatory and as damaging as possible. But the true venom was in the demands, and in the threats that backed them up. It ordered us to immediately and permanently cease and desist all organized team activities, practices, and competitions within my home. It was a direct, legal order to dissolve my son's team. The threat that followed was a brutal, two-pronged assault. If we did not comply within 10 business days, the letter stated, the HOA would file a massive civil lawsuit against me, Mark Chen, personally. They would seek not only a permanent injunction to enforce the ban, but also punitive financial damages for the significant and ongoing degradation of the community's character and property values. It was a threat designed to bleed me dry in legal fees. A war of financial attrition. The second prong of the threat was even more cruel. The letter stated the HOA's intent to formally contact the parents of the other 4 boys on Team Tempest, to inform them that their sons were participating in an illegal, uninsured, and psychologically damaging operation being run out of my home. It was a threat to poison my relationships, to turn the other families against me, and to isolate my son from his closest friends. I watched Leo as he read that final paragraph. I saw the color drain from his face. I saw his dream, a beautiful, vibrant thing that he had built with his friends through thousands of hours of dedication and teamwork, crumbling into dust before his eyes. She can't do that. Can she? Dad, he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. She can't just lie to their parents. She can't break up our team. In that moment, my long and agonizing internal debate about my own identity, about whether to use the power and influence of my past, came to a swift and brutal end. I had tried so hard to be just Mark, the quiet, retired dad. I had resisted the urge to become Mark Chen, the co-founder of Phoenix Games, the man whose name carried immense weight in the world she so arrogantly dismissed. I had seen the use of that power as a betrayal of my new, quiet life. But now, looking at my son's stricken face, I realized the truth. To not use the power I had, to not use every weapon at my disposal to defend my child from this malicious, destructive woman, was not an act of principle. It was an act of cowardice. It was a betrayal not of my past, but of my present, of my single most important role to be my son's father. I reached across the table and put my hand on his shoulder. "No, Leo," I said, my voice quiet, but filled with a cold, hard certainty that was as absolute as a law of physics. She cannot. I stood up and put the legal documents aside. "Go on," I said, my voice a little softer now. "Your team is waiting downstairs. You have a championship to win. Let me handle this." He looked at me, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes, and he nodded. He went downstairs, and a moment later, I heard the faint, muffled sound of his voice, the sound of a leader rejoining his team. I sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The final decisive battle was now set. The HOA picnic was in 3 days. The VCT North American Grand Final was in 2. Brenda Mills had brought the war to my family, and I was about to bring the entire world to her quiet, little picnic. The annual Maple Creek Community Picnic was the apex of Brenda's social calendar, the day she reigned supreme over her perfectly manicured kingdom. She moved through the crowd of families on checkered blankets with a practiced, regal grace, a benevolent queen bestowing her favor upon her loyal subjects. The air was thick with the scent of grilled hot dogs and a sense of oppressive, enforced wholesomeness. My son Leo and his teammates, Team Tempest, sat with me at a picnic table on the far edge of the park. We were a quiet, self-contained island in a sea of forced jollity. We were waiting. The grand final of the Valorant Champions Tour, North American tournament, had been played online, from the soundproofed sanctuary of my basement, the night before. The match had been a grueling, 5-hour epic, a back-and-forth battle that had ended well after midnight. No one here knew the outcome. To them, the boys were simply the basement trolls, the strange, noisy outcasts. Brenda took to the small, portable stage, tapping the microphone with a proprietary air. After a short, rambling speech about community spirit, her eyes, filled with a cold, triumphant fire, found our table, She was moving in for the kill. As many of you are aware, she began, her voice taking on a tone of grave seriousness. Our community has been dealing with a persistent and disruptive problem, an activity that is not in keeping with the healthy, productive, family-friendly values we all cherish. Therefore, I am proud to announce that the board has retained legal counsel and is moving forward with a formal action to put an end to this nuisance. At our next meeting, we will be voting on a new, common-sense bylaw that will prohibit any organized team practices of any kind from being conducted in a residential home. A wave of firm, supportive applause went through the crowd. She had them. She had won. She smiled, a tight, vicious little smile of pure, unadulterated victory. It was at that precise, exquisitely timed moment that the sleek, black production van pulled to a silent stop on the street beside the park. The van's side was emblazoned with the globally recognized, dynamic logo of the Valorant Champions Tour. The side door slid open, and a man emerged who was a familiar face to millions of esports fans around the world. It was James Patterson, the lead host and commentator for the VCT. He was followed by a professional, three-person camera crew. He strode onto the field, a microphone in his hand, moving with the easy, charismatic confidence of a man who lived his life on camera. He walked directly to the stage, stopping beside a stunned, speechless Brenda. "Excuse me," he said, his famous, broadcast-ready voice cutting through the confused silence. "So sorry to interrupt. My name is James Patterson, from the VCT. I'm looking for a team called Tempest. I was told I could find them here." Every head in the park swiveled to stare at our table. Leo and his friends, on my cue, stood up, their faces a perfect, practiced mask of humble surprise. "That's them," Dash boomed, a brilliant, 1,000-watt smile on his face. He and the camera crew jogged over to our table. "Leo guys, congratulations. We've been trying to reach your manager since last night. That final match was one for the history books. One of the most incredible, come-from-behind victories I have ever had the privilege to commentate." He turned to the bewildered, silent crowd. "Folks," he announced, his voice now taking on the tone of a major sports broadcast. "I am not sure if you are aware, but last night, over 3 million people around the world watched the live stream of the Valorant Champions Tour North American Final. And the team that came out on top, in a stunning, underdog victory that has the entire professional gaming world buzzing, was your very own Team Tempest." A collective, audible gasp swept through the park. "And with that championship," Dash continued, his voice rising with excitement, "comes the winner's share of the VCT's official $2.25 million prize pool." He signaled to the van. The rear doors opened. 2 crew members emerged, carrying something massive and gleaming between them. It was the championship cup. It was a magnificent, towering work of art, crafted from polished silver and glowing blue crystal, a trophy as large and as prestigious as the Stanley Cup. They placed it on the picnic table, where it shone like a beacon from another, more important world. "Along with this trophy," Dash roared, "Team Tempest will be taking home the grand prize of $1 million. The number, that impossible, life-altering number, dropped into the quiet suburban park like a meteor. $1 million. But the final, devastating blow was yet to come. Dash turned to me, the main camera now tight on my face. "Of course," he said, his voice now filled with a genuine, almost reverent respect. "None of this would have been possible without the team's coach, their mentor, the man who built them a world-class training facility and guided them to victory. a man who knows a little something about building champions. Ladies and gentlemen, a true legend of the gaming industry, the co-founder of Phoenix Games and the architect of the revolutionary CodeStorm engine, Mr. Mark Chen. My name, my real name, my real identity, was out. The quiet, retired dad was a titan of the very industry she had so arrogantly and so ignorantly dismissed. The circle was complete. The unproductive, lazy hobby was a professional, million-dollar sport. The basement-dwelling freaks were national champions, wealthy young heroes, and the pride of their hometown. The unpleasant element was now the single greatest claim to fame that Maple Creek had ever known. I looked at Brenda. She was frozen at the podium, her face a pale, horrified, and utterly broken mask of catastrophic disbelief. Her small, petty, beige world had just been publicly and decisively annihilated. The aftermath of that picnic was not a slow unraveling, but a sudden, complete, and total collapse of Brenda Mills's world. The proposed bylaw was never spoken of again, a forgotten relic of a disgraced regime. In the stunned, starstruck aftermath of the championship reveal, her authority, which had been built on a fragile foundation of fear and social control, simply ceased to exist. She had not just been defeated, she had been rendered irrelevant. Her downfall was as public as her crusade had been. The story of the petty HOA president who tried to ban the team of million-dollar esports champions became a viral sensation, a delicious tale of modern-day comeuppance that was picked up by gaming blogs and even some mainstream news outlets. She became a local pariah, a walking punchline. The parents of the other boys on Team Tempest, whom she had threatened with legal notices and slander, were her most immediate and vocal executioners. They organized, hired an attorney, and threatened the HOA with a massive lawsuit for harassment and defamation on behalf of their sons. The HOA board, terrified of the legal and financial repercussions, immediately turned on their former leader. They publicly censured her, stripped her of her presidency, and launched a forensic audit of her tenure. The audit, of course, uncovered a history of financial mismanagement and the misuse of community funds for her personal vendettas. But the final, most satisfying stroke of justice came from the state. The social worker from CPS, Ms. Albright, had followed through on her promise. She had filed a formal report on the malicious and unfounded complaint against my family. When the story of Brenda's public humiliation broke, the district attorney's office connected the dots. Faced with a mountain of evidence and a community of angry parents willing to testify against her, Brenda was charged with filing a false report to a government agency, a serious misdemeanor. The combination of social ruin, financial liability to the HOA, and a criminal charge was a triple blow from which she could not recover. She and her husband sold their house at a loss and moved away, vanishing from Maple Creek under a cloud of shame and disgrace. For my family, and for the community, it was the dawn of a new, much brighter era. Maple Creek, once a quiet, anonymous suburb, was now proudly known as the home of Team Tempest. The HOA, under a new and profoundly humbled leadership, issued a formal public apology to my family and the team. They used community funds not to hire lawyers, but to upgrade the neighborhood's internet infrastructure, proudly advertising their new championship-grade fiber network. Team Tempest, now flush with prize money and a lucrative sponsorship deal from my old company, Phoenix Games, moved their operations to a new, state-of-the-art professional training facility downtown. My basement, the site of so many battles, fell silent once more. One evening, a few weeks after the picnic, Leo and I were down in the now empty room. The gaming stations were gone. The whiteboard was clean. It was just a quiet, peaceful basement. "It's too quiet now, Dad," Leo said, a wistful smile on his face. "I know what you mean," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. I had set up a new, much smaller gaming station in my office upstairs. 2 comfortable chairs, 2 monitors, side by side. "Come on," I said, a smile on my face. "I think the old man has time for a round or two. No prize money this time. Just for fun." We went upstairs, leaving the quiet basement behind. I had come to Maple Creek seeking a simple, peaceful life. I had found it, but not in the way I had expected. I had learned that true peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the strength to face it, the courage to protect what you love, and the wisdom to know that the most joyful noise in the world is the sound of a dream being realized.